Hi, I'm Ronn, the president of Spotam, and I'm here with Mihai Voicu, and we are going to talk about IoT security. So, first of all, welcome to Israel, Mihai.
Thank you very much, Israel.
And maybe we will start with you telling us about yourself and your experience in this area.
So my expertise starts with being a chief security officer for Telit. In the last year, I've been appointed to oversee the products and services, everything related to security for Telit. Prior to that, I came through acquisition from Telit. I've been there as chief information and security officer. And also, I have to say that in the last 3 years, when we started to looking at security for Internet of Things, I developed in 2013 the first best practices for M2M in relation to security. And that was actually part of a campaign initiated by Telecommunication Industry Association when the M2M revolution started. So I have a quite experience in the IoT / M2M field.
Okay, that's good, and that puts you in the right place to answer our questions about IoT security.
Absolutely.
And that's what we are going to do. So maybe we'll start with trying to understand how security relates to the future world of IoT. I mean, predictions are saying that in 2020 we are going to have more than 50 billion connections, okay? And those are going to influence critical areas of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What are the threats that we see today and we envision today regarding this IoT? And are there unique threats to IoT or simply regular IoT security threats? Security threat, I'm sorry.
IoT, it's a very big buzzword. It's a very big, also an area to understand. Today, you can apply IoT for almost any concept of technology or any concepts of transferring information. Well, when it comes to security, there are aspects that can be taken from normal IT industry, can apply to IoT, can take from regulations in banks or health industry. But IoT as a security threats, commonly known, they develop as you go. One of the aspects that we discovered first at the beginning was the complexity, because it reaches so deep into any organization, and it's not only vertical and say, okay, I have vertical threats that are specific to automotive or specific to health industry or specific to industrial world, but also IoT now generalize them to the use of platforms which are horizontal. Now you have phases of security that have not been exploited or explored before. One of the threats that I can categorize them very simple will be related to how you see the data. In IoT, the most important part is who owns the data. In my view, there are two categories that you have to look at: it's data at rest and data in transit. One of the aspects that technology currently does very well in terms of security knows how to deal with data in transit. You have all sorts of protocols that will secure the connections. Also, you're going to see a more influence into the data at rest in terms of security. Now you're going to see pods of data that needs to be secured in a totally different way. One of the threats that I see currently is the inflection points. When you're looking at IoT, you have transfer of information between different platforms, different areas, and all of them sometimes will use different level of encryptions, or they will use different types of aggregation points. It's a very, very, very tough crowd, I should say it, and it's not going to get easier. But I think with business objectives in place, you're going to see more and more securing solutions that will overcome the threats.
But is it feasible? I mean, talking about 50 billion connections, and talking about such a complexity, and talking about different level of encryption and different devices with a variety which is much more than what we are used from, let's call it traditional IT. aren't we going to face a situation that the security need will stop the industry, will not get to the 50 billion connections?
If you take the current amount of cellular connections all around the globe, I think one of the GSMA's reports are showing like 500 million devices distributed in so many platforms called, basically each country can have multiple carriers, it supports it. Now, that's basically 1/100 of the value of the billions of devices. What I think is going to happen is the security is going to start being applied to aggregation points. Devices will actually more and more will have the freedom to connect to aggregation points, and the security will actually apply to aggregation points or the connection to the aggregation points to the platforms, or from the platform to the enterprises. The billions of devices that we are talking, 50 billion devices, some of them will practically not be able to connect secure. There is no reason to have security because the information that they're going to transfer has little value unless it's put in a big context. So while you're looking, I'll look to the next step. So you're going to have a next step, it's an aggregation point, maybe a gateway. And that gateway is actually the key. If you have access to that gateway and you don't secure it, and data in transit or data in at rest, now you have a problem.
So, I mean, if right now we are putting the load on the network, who is going to be responsible? I mean, is it going to be a governmental issue? By the way, are there any requirements from governments in building IoT infrastructure? Is it going to be the carriers, or is it going to be distributed somehow? I mean, who is going to take responsibility?
It's an interesting subject. Telit, especially my group, is very active. One of the activities that we do is we go to organizations that have power to influence. One of them is GSMA. It's a very well-known organization, and we are part of establishing best practices for security for IoT. Now, we discuss many ways. There is a full document that describes what needs to be done for services, also what needs to be done for endpoint devices, as well as for the networks. Now, that can be translated in some sort of a self-assessment and later on in some sort of a certification. But you still don't have regulations. Recently, I was part of a panel on the US side, and we noticed that the US government is taking actions trying to establish workshops that will understand the impact of IoT on the governmental agencies. There is a good and a bad thing here, because once you learn what's happening, regulations will come. One thing that I have to say that you have to analyze it from a risk assessment point of view. What we see right now, some regulations that are IT-based have been pushed into the IoT for critical infrastructure, like energy, a little bit on the telecommunications, because it's part of that. But there is nothing general at this moment. And I hope, to be honest, I don't think will be needed for the explosion. I think there's going to be a phase where things will come in, will aggregate, and something is going to happen, and now you're going to see the regulations. So I think it's still far away from regulations at this moment.
And those regulations, by the way, will be general, or you still are expecting, like the SPY, it's automotive, to be more vertically oriented?
I think the regulation will start with data, with the information,
okay,
and how the privacy is related to the data. We already see activities in Europe related to privacy. US, in other hands, is a little bit more flexible and more liberal. I think they will come as they are needed. And they will be, I think, regional specific. There are still a lot of privacy issues that needs to be dealt with even at the local level. One thing that IoT does, it has global reach. Now you're going to have a problem understanding how to deal with that privacy globally. So I think it's still very early into that process.
Maybe we'll, as a last question, we will talk. You're coming from Telit, and Telit has a strong claim about IoT security. Maybe you'll tell us a little bit what does Telit do in this area.
We actually have 3 pillars in Telit. One pillar is basically the modules business. The second one is connectivity, and the last one is what we call it platform. The last one, I should say, we should call it portal, and I will explain why. But we'll stay with the platform for a second, so it's easy for a general audience. In the modules, we want to encompass the best practices and the best technologies. So we have the ability to get hardware encryption, also hardware-based secure storage with specialized chips. Those will actually be able to drive the encryption and the privacy and the integrity and the confidentiality of the connections. Now, if you move into the connectivity business, basically the same concepts will apply on the connectivity. You go to secure APNs. We use VPNs to enterprises. Now going to the platform business, now you have the aggregation point. Basically your platform is becoming your aggregation point. Why is portal? Because now you're selling services based on this whole chain of technologies that encompasses. The platform itself has different layers. We start with basically a simple authentication. We go further into a more advanced when it comes down to session control. And also because of our multi-tenant solution, now we have the ability to segregate the information per tenant. So we want to make sure that while everybody knows where their data is, we give them the controls that they can audit what's happening.
Okay, Mihai, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
It was very interesting, and we are looking forward for the IoT Security Conference to learn more.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.